for Mother's Day or a birthday. This is just a little holder for a Russell Stover marshmallow egg, or some of these are cream filled. This is the 1 ounce Russell Stover egg. And I used a real mashup of products tonight, a real mixture. In fact, I'm not even going to list everything ahead of time. I'll just mention them as we go because I used quite a few different products. And then the matching card, just Happy Easter, and pretty simple. The card's pretty simple. Let's make the egg holder first. Okay, so we start with a 9 13/16 strip of designer series paper. I am using, I'm turning my lights up here, I am using the Love You Always specialty designer series paper. It was in the January through June catalog, but you could use anything. In fact, you could use cardstock here, but I'm using the designer series paper. So this is 9 13/16 long by just under 2 inches wide, and I'll explain why I cut it just under 2 inches when we get to the part where I can show you that. And then we're using a strip of cardstock. This is Rococo Rose, and this is the Rococo Rose specialty paper. There are 3 colors. I think one is Desert Sand, there's another pink, and then there's this Rococo Rose with the foiling. And so this cardstock is Rococo Rose also, and this measures 6 3/4 by 1 3/4. 6 3/4 by 1 3/4. So we're going to do a little bit of scoring first of all. When you score your designer series paper, especially if you're using this specialty paper like I am, score it on the printed side or on the foiled side. I found that when I tried to score it on the other side and then fold and burnish it, sometimes this would crack a little bit. So score it on this side, and we're going to score at, let's see, 4 1/4 inch from each end. So we're going to score it first from the left side, 4 1/4 inch. And then we're going to flip it around and score from the other short side, 4 1/4. And it's important to flip it like that because then that leaves a space in the middle here that is the exact size we need. So that's why I do it that way. So we'll set that one aside. And then your cardstock, we're going to score at, let's see, this one you can just start at one end and score across. So I'm going to score at 1 1/4, 3 1/4, 4 1/2, and 6 1/2. And I'm going to turn it over and fold it to the inside just gently. And I'm not doing this real hard. I don't need a really hard crease on this. And that helps prevent any cracking on the outside. And this, I'm going to fold it in. I'm keeping the indentations on the outside. I don't know if you can actually see that. Keeping them on the outside and folding in like this. So I'm going to fold and burnish on each of these. I learned that from another demonstrator I was watching one time. She said that when you score, you break the fibers a little bit, and so you would think you would fold it into that indentation, but by folding away, the fibers are already broken a little bit, and so you avoid cracking your cardstock or your paper, which is interesting. So we have everything's folded and burnished, and now we're going to fold. I want the short end on the right side, and I'm going to fold in on the second score line just like that, and on the first score line on the left. So what's happening is that little section is being overlapped. So I'm going to put glue on that little section, and then I'm just going to lay this one down on top of it. Give it a rub, make sure these are square. And then I have some punching to do on this one, and I am using the Delightful Tag Topper punch here. And the reason I cut my paper just a little bit narrower than 2 inches is because I want to fit it into this slot that is 2 inches, and I find that if I cut exactly 2 inches, it's not quite as easy a fit. So I just shave a tiny bit off and make it just under 2 inches. I'm going to slide one end into this tag topper. Sometimes you have to angle down to get it started, but I want to go all the way in until the end of my paper touches this end of the punch, and punch, and then turn it around and do the other end. And that makes a nice scalloped top and punches a hole at the same time for my ribbon to tie this closed. Make sure, yep. There we go. Alright, so next I'm going to put glue on one of these big sides of this little rectangle that I made. Just going to go around the edges here, and I'll set this box right inside the space between the two score lines here, and just line everything up and press the side of this long strip to the glue. And then I'm just going to lay it down on its side and use my bone folder to just reach in there and make good contact with everything. Then we're going to do the same thing with this side. Just going to put a little bit of glue here, and then just going to wrap this up the side there, turn it over, and just give that a rub inside also. And that's it for the construction of the box part, so we'll set that aside. And next we will work on the label on this little box. For the foundation of this piece, I cut a bit of Hydrangea Hill Designer Series paper with the number 2 oval from the Stitched Shapes set. And I numbered mine from smallest to largest, so the number 2 for me is the next to the smallest. That's the stitched labels. And then from the Quite Curvy bundle, I used the Floral stamp and the coordinating die. And I'm going to talk about how I colored this and how I stamped it in a second. And then I want a bird that faces left, and this is from the Quite Curvy bundle also. And then finally I have my sentiment pieces, and I want to show you how I stamped these too and punched them out to save myself a little bit of time. So those are the pieces. So I'm going to show you a little bit about how I made them. A lot of times when we stamp, I think we have to stamp with tuxedo black, and we don't. I stamped all of the images for tonight's projects with crumb cake ink, and it gives a little softer look. I think you can notice it especially on the card front. I just really like how soft that looks, especially when I'm using pastel colors instead of the black. So that's what I did for the stamping part. And then for the coloring part, for the bird, I used my watercolor pencils. And the reason I did is because I didn't want a real harsh line anywhere. I wanted to kind of fade the color out. And that's what the watercolor pencils allow you to do. I don't know if you can see that. The color just kind of fades out. It's just a blush of color on him. And I used Flirty Flamingo and what was this? Coastal Cabana. These pencils are both from the watercolor set number 2. And then to get a little bit of blending, I used a blender pen. Okay, so I'm going to just do a little bit of coloring on him real quick just to show you. So I just scribble some color on with my watercolor pencil. And I'm not coloring him in all the way. I'm just putting a little color on. Then I'm going to use my blender pen, and I can tell which end I was using on the pink. So I'm going to use that same end. And I'm just going to come in here and just lightly blend that the watercolor pencil, just lightly. And then I'll use the other end because I know I've been using dark colors with this end. And I'll just blend the, what I say that was, Coastal Cabana, just to give it a nice little watercolor look. See that? And for the floral element, since I did want to color these in solid, I used Stampin' Blends. I used light Rococo Rose and light Just Jade. And let's see, I used the blunt end of these, and really I wasn't too particular. If you've been watching my videos, you know that I'm okay with things being a little bit messy. I don't feel like I have to color these in completely solid. In fact, I think a light touch is better. I just come in and I'm almost just kind of dotting the color on because these are pretty little areas, fine little areas. Just like that, a little stem. And that's all I did. And so here is a finished colored floral element. Very simple to do. So I already have these cut out to save a little bit of time. But I'll show you how I put them together. Oh, I want to show you how I did the sentiments. This Happy Easter sentiment comes from the A Wish for Everything stamp set, and I used it because I like how small these are. They fit nicely on a little tag like this. So it was Happy and Easter is what I used from this. And while I have this out, the Easter die cut on the card came from the coordinating dies, and they are called Word Wishes dies. I'll talk more about that in a minute. So this is from Word Wishes, A Wish for Everything stamp set. And what I did to make life easier for myself is I put both stamps on a block. So I have the Happy and I have the Easter. And I have them spaced out a little bit. So I used Just Jade ink for these. And I'm going to try to stamp these pretty much in the center of this little strip. And this strip, by the way, is, let me measure it real quick. It's like 1 1/8 inches wide. Okay. So I'm going to stamp these pretty much in the middle of this strip, just like that. Then I'm going to use the classic label punch, and I heard today that this is being discontinued. I'm heartbroken. I love this punch, and this is one of the reasons. It's because it cuts out these word dies or word stamps that I use so often. All right, so what I'm doing is, this is the classic label punch. I'm just centering my word in that opening and popping it out. And then the other one, the next one. And that one's a little bit short. I don't have enough to hold on to. And pop that one out. So as easy as that, you have these little sentiments that are already trimmed. The ends are already trimmed, and I can use them now on my tag. How simple is that? All right, so to put this little tag together, let's see, I adhered the floral sentiment first. Okay, so I'm just kind of draping this along the side of my oval. And then next I'm going to add my sentiments, and I'm going to pop those up on mini dimensionals. So I'm going to put a couple of mini dimensionals on the back of each one of these. All right, so the little bird, I'm going to put dimensionals. I think I'm going to put the dimensionals on here instead of trying to put them on him. And then maybe just one. I really would rather put two. Let's see. That one might show. Just going to move that over a tiny bit. And I might have to put one on him. One of these dimensionals is actually going to stick to the box itself because it's hanging over. See that? Which is fine. So I'm going to adhere this with liquid glue, but I'm only going to put liquid glue about in the bottom 2/3, okay? Because when I close this, when it has the egg inside, I want it to be free at the top, right? So liquid glue on the bottom 2/3. All right, so I have glue on the lower 2/3, and I'm just going to set this on there. So I'm going to set this one aside and let it dry, and I'll show you on this one what I did here. This is the Just Jade gingham ribbon from the Flowers for Every Season ribbon combo pack, and I really like it. It's got like little tiny scallops on the edges, so pretty. And I don't know how long I cut this. What's that look like? About 4 inches. Okay, and then this is a piece of the white baker's twine from the snail mail twine combo pack. And so I just threaded my ribbon, the wide ribbon, through those 2 holes, and then just tied a bow with the white twine around it. There we go, just like that. And then if I tied the bow too far from the actual packet, I just pulled on the 2 tails of the big ribbon, of the wide ribbon, and just slid that twine down. I'm going to add a few pearls. These are the Pearl Basic Jewels. I always say that backwards. And I just added like a medium-sized one. There we go, all done. I think these are very pretty. I really like using the crumb cake ink to stamp with and getting that nice soft look. Alright, so we'll set those aside. Next we'll work on our card, and to make the card coordinate with the little egg holder, I used some of the same designer series paper and the Rococo Rose card base. So let me clear a few things out of the way and get dimensions. So the card base is a standard A2 card base, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and this rectangle of basic white measures 3 3/4 by 5. 3 3/4 by 5, and then this piece is, let's see, it's 1 1/2 inches wide. This is that Love You Always specialty designer series paper. Same thing I made the egg holder out of. It's 1 1/2 inches wide by 3 3/4 inches long. Then for the foundation of my sentiment element, I used the largest oval from the Stitched Shapes die set. This is the largest oval, and I used 2 of the floral elements that same thing that I used on the front of this, but I'm using 2 of them, and 2 birds. One is left facing and one is right facing. So those are the elements. So when you're making your elements for your egg holder, you could just go ahead and make a few more for your card. So here they are, and then the 2 birds. And I wanted to talk to you just a little bit about how I did the sentiment. So this is a die cut. I mentioned it. It's the one that coordinates with the A Wish for Everything stamp set, and the die set is called Word Wishes. So whenever I have a really fine die like this with lots of tiny little areas, I don't want to be having to put glue on that. So I put this on an adhesive sheet before I cut it, and I'm just going to quickly show you how that works. So I have a scrap of Just Jade cardstock. That's what I used for my sentiment. And I have a piece of an adhesive sheet cut down to size. Rather than trying to work with the whole sheet, I just cut a piece that's going to fit what I need it to fit. So on one side of these adhesive sheets, there's a cut line. And you can use that to start peeling away the opposite side. You don't want to, this side has adhesive on it, so you just want to use it to start this side. So this is the side that's cut, it's scored. This is the side you actually want to peel away. But to get this started, sometimes it's easier to flip it over, get a corner, and then start with the other side. So I'm going to peel this away, but I'm not going to remove it completely. And actually, I want to work from this side. I'm not going to remove it completely. I'm just going to peel it back until I have enough of this lower adhesive coated layer exposed to lay my piece of cardstock in there. Just like that. Then I'm going to lay this back down. And then I'm going to trim this with an old pair of scissors because I don't want to get that adhesive on my good scissors. I'm going to trim, so I'm cutting off a tiny bit of the adhesive. I don't want any of that adhesive hanging over my cardstock because that can gum up your cutting and embossing machine. So I'm just trimming this. And I'm keeping this sheet on, the sheet that I lifted up. I think it helps protect my scissors from the adhesive. And then one more. And obviously when I finish this last side, this top piece is no longer attached to anything. But what I have now is everything's even. That adhesive, that double-sided adhesive is not sticking out anywhere. So I can lay my die on here, run it through my cutting and embossing machine, and what I get is a very fine die cut that has double-sided adhesive already on the back of it. And then for the happy, did I mention that I used a ton of different products on these these projects? The happy for this sentiment piece came from, what is it called? I knew I'd forget the name. Came from the Well Said set. And I used it because these words are just a little bit bigger. You see the happy is just a little bit bigger than the one I used on the egg holder. So I felt like the scale was better for my card from this one. And I embossed it, I heat embossed it with white on a piece of Rococo Rose cardstock. Okay, so now I'm going to assemble this. So I'm going to grab my silicone craft sheet and just put it under, because this oval is stitched and glue could ooze through there, and I want to try to do a little damage control here. And I just applied the glue to the oval. And then the next piece I'm going to put on is the Easter, because that will help me determine where to put the happy once I have that on. I kind of just lay things out without gluing them down to give me an idea where to place things. So I have this double-backed or double-sided adhesive on my sentiment, and you can see that score line, and that's a good place to start. So I'm going to pull one side off and then the other. I'm using the Take Your Pick tool, little pointy end, to help start these. I'm using this tool more and more. You probably have seen me grabbing it to pick things up with. I use the putty end, sticky putty end, to pick things up. And then the happy, I popped up on dimensionals, just over to the side here. By the way, I cut this out with the classic label punch also. It's a little tighter fit, but it works and I like it. So and then I'm going to pop these little fellas up on mini dimensionals also. Up there. And another nice thing about this mat, if any of my dimensionals hang over, they're not going to stick to this mat. So I can go ahead and assemble this whole thing and then pick it up later and just put it on the card front. So I'm putting 2 on this little bird, because if you just put one dimensional on an object, it tends to move around. Whereas if you put 2, you kind of stop that pivot that can happen if you only put 1. Okay, so and this little guy down here. Okay, so we'll set this aside momentarily and work on the card base itself. During the live presentation of this project, I forgot to wrap my ribbon around this piece of white cardstock before I had adhered it to the front of the card. So if you're watching the replay, you just want to stop right now, cut a length of Just Jade gingham ribbon, long enough so you can wrap both ends around to the back of the cardstock. And I used a couple of glue dots on the back of the cardstock on each side and just wrapped the ends of the ribbon around and attached it to those glue dots. Then once you have your ribbon wrapped and secured, you can proceed with the rest of the video. So this is pretty basic. I'm just going to adhere with my stamp and seal, my white rectangle. I like the wide border that this size rectangle leaves on the card base. And then the piece of designer series paper Next, we will adhere this to the card base, and I used Stampin' Dimensionals to pop it up. And I was going to say make sure you straddle the ribbon with your dimensionals, but I won't have to worry about that since I forgot to put the ribbon on. And I always have trouble leveling an oval shape. Anybody else like that? So I'm looking at the happy and I'm just trying to make sure that it's fairly level. And then I have a prepared bow somewhere. And look there, there's the ribbon that I should have put on my card. Oh well. But I am going to attach this bow. I think that'll be pretty just by itself. And to attach the bow, I'm going to use glue dots, several. Just like that. All right, so then the last thing I did was I added a few pastel pearls. So even without the ribbon, I think it looks, without the ribbon across, I think it's pretty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed today's project, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. I'm Kim Ray. I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator, and you can find me at foggybonnet.com. I will have the link below in the description. I will also have links for the products used in today's project. Thanks so much. I'll see you again next time.